Overwatch Hot Takes. My name is KarQ. Here we go. All right, let's see if this week you guys actually added some takes regarding 6v6 and perks and whatnot. First one is Hot Takes: maps matter more than game modes. What I mean by that is it's not necessarily bad to have a lot of modes because that's just a small part of the map itself. The game mode should be built around the map, not the other way around. I don't think the take is very hot. I think most of the game population and community agrees at this point we have enough game modes, like 5 or 6 of them, right? We have Hybrid, Escort, Control, Flashpoint. Anyways, you get the point. There's enough game modes in the game, and I think Overwatch's strength is actually the map variety. They got rid of Clash, and we could see how, like, you know, new game modes may not necessarily be like the thing that Overwatch needs. A lot of people have not had a great reception to A, Clash, B, maybe Push. Push is the one I forgot earlier, and C, even Flashpoint. Some people don't like it. Personally, I do like Flashpoint, and Push maybe not as much as the others, but I don't mind it. But all in all, I do think at this point in the game, we don't need any more game modes. Just a healthy new addition of new maps that are well designed. Now, the last part we said the game mode should be built around the map and not the way around, not the other way around. I mean, I think I disagree with that because I think the map should be designed with the game mode in mind. You can see early Overwatch 1 where they didn't have that intention. You could see early parts of like Nimbani First Point, if you guys remember the OG version, not the reworked one, where there's just so much dead areas and space that isn't being used. And honestly, now that I think about it, I think Esperanza also has that problem too, where there's a lot of like dead areas right in the beginning or in that rooms right when you spawn that nobody ever uses because the health pack is so out of reach. So I think modern map design in this game should be created with the intent of understanding how the gameplay flow works and just like removing all this unnecessary extra area that doesn't need to be used. Like, there's no fighting ever happening in these spaces. And I don't really know what their process is. Maybe they can simulate some team fights and just see where people tend to gravitate and places that nobody travels to in like a heat map where like 99% of players never go into. It's something you could just truncate and like increase your work development flow and just get rid of that stuff. But all in all, they should be also designed with, you know, not just like getting rid of like bloated areas, but just keeping the sight lines distinct, important, high ground accessible. All those things make a very good map, which is why I suppose King's Row for a long time was very well received because the high ground isn't too obnoxious where nobody can reach it. It's like kind of like medium height, right? You think about the first point, it's not too bad. A lot of people can even like rocket jump to the high ground. You know, there's good flat levels, a little bit of elevation dips around the third point, but overall like pretty flat with like some buildings to work around. And I think that's, you know, more isn't necessarily necessary to create a good map. Less is more sometimes, in fact. I'm trying to think of the most recent maps outside of Clash. I think, what was it, Runasapi? I actually like Runasapi quite a bit as a push map. Could use a bit more tweaks. A couple of the reworks recently have actually solved some of the older issues that they ran into, like I mentioned earlier, with dead spaces and annoying chokes and annoying sight lines. For example, the remade Route 66 earlier in Overwatch 2. A couple of the reworked Nimbani, simplifying the map a lot more. Adding some high ground onto Dorado Second has been a godsend. So, like, you know, I think they've actually done a really good job with the maps, and maps are a strong point in this game. Next one, if they can remove Clash after months of criticism, they can remove Push. I honestly don't think Push is as bad as people say. I do think Clash was way worse objectively with the way the gameplay flow felt. How like I had games where I was down like 0-2 and about to lose the first tick on the third point, and we somehow made a huge comeback, even though the scoreboard didn't really dictate that. I think like all in all, our entire team was negative. It was like, you know, 15 and 20 deaths, or no, maybe not 15 and 20. Like, you know, I mean, 10 kill, 10 elims, 15 deaths. It didn't seem like we deserved that win, but I've definitely won games like that. And I've also felt games where like I was popping off with my whole team and they somehow just had this crazy comeback and won, even though it didn't feel like they deserved it. So like, I think that volatility where the extremes are very extreme feels really bad, and they have to kind of like relook at that. I don't actually think Push gets as much criticism compared to Clash in Overwatch 2 and 2CP did in Overwatch 1. I mentioned this all the time in these videos, but the biggest pain point in Push is that like the team that like takes the first advantage has a bigger advantage than where it may seem because of the distance the push bot has to go back to come back to neutral. And I do think one of the possible solutions is letting the robot start moving by itself back to neutral, or even slowly passively, just like kind of like an objective moving by itself, similar to Marvel Rivals. Or maybe on the flip side, if it's like not on neutral and you have control of it, it'll naturally push back to neutral so that you can take advantage of this time to have all 5 of you guys like take proper space and position yourself in a good spot. So the time it takes for the robot to get back there, maybe you can still keep somebody pushing it once it's back at neutral, but the time in between could potentially give you time to set up and give you more of a strategic opening, if that makes any sense. So to reiterate, let's say team A wins the first team fight, pushes 30 meters. loses, team B comes back, but the push bot, somebody on team B has to tap it first to have control of it, and then the bot will automatically walk back to neutral first. So you can already start sending your other players to a better strategic position. And then maybe once it's back at the center, maybe you still need to send somebody there to push it there. But at least during that neutral phase, you don't have to have anybody on it. It's more obvious if like it's all the way pushed to pretty much the end of the map, and then your team wins the fight, and then you send all 5, or if you're playing 66, all 6 of you guys into a better spot, and that push bot makes it back there without feeling like you have to make up that ground. And that's the part that feels pretty bad for push. But anyways, I'm just spitballing now. What does this take? The story missions kind of feel like a paradox. They would probably be way more successful if they just added more missions and maybe did more external things with the lore. Obligatory, what if Overwatch had an arcane equivalent? But they seem to not want to commit to that because the initial trilogy wasn't that successful because of the gap between the promise and the delivery. Even if Overwatch 2 PvE mode we do have isn't great, it's still better than no PvE and neglected lore that like we've had since then. Maybe I'm just stupid, but I'm kind of getting lost on the point you're trying to make. Let me just try to dissect this. Feels like a paradox, sure, that's your opinion. They would probably be more successful if they added more missions and did more external things with the lore. I actually disagree with this. I actually don't think that adding more missions of that caliber of what we saw would have actually done anything in the long term for the players. It maybe would have satiated some of the players' taste for a little bit more PvE, but honestly, I think if it was at that level, it would have 100% underperformed and would have under-delivered people's expectations and potentially maybe upset even more people. So I'm actually glad they ripped the band-aid off and said, you know, this product sucks. Somebody there had the balls to say, honestly, even after working on it all these years, when I say sucks, like it was fun for like, there's no replayability, right? I found it fun for the first time I played it and never touched it again. And I think it was just one of those like objective takes that a manager or somebody had to take a look at it and be like, guys, this will not do. I'm actually kind of glad they scrapped it earlier rather than later. That's my take on that. I mean, you say they should have done more external things with the lore. I mean, I agree with that. You know, I think everybody wanted more lore. And it seemed like they wanted, but then now your next part says, but they seem to not want to commit to that because the initial trilogy wasn't that successful. I think the original trilogy of the game was very successful. Or maybe you're talking about the initial trilogy of the 3 missions that came out because of the gap between it. Probably, but like because they had to scrap so many of the they probably did make more than just 3 missions, by the way. Like people think they only made 3. No, they probably made way more that no one will ever see the light of day. And that's the thing that happens in development. A lot of times projects get scrapped. It just happened to be that this was a grandiose announcement by Jeff Kaplan in 2019 BlizzCon that people had expectations. But behind closed doors, on every game, on every, not even just game, like any sort of development progress, I'm speaking to you guys, devs, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of projects and shit that gets made that the public will never ever see. Just so happens that this one had a public face to it, which is a little unfortunate. You know, I do think the little bit of cutscenes we did get in the PvE, those 3 missions we did get, were kind of nice to kind of like add on to the story, but I kind of wish they just shipped those cutscenes that I'm pretty sure were filmed and made for the following couple of missions, just kind of just bunch them all together and just release that. That's what I kind of hope we would get, but you know, beggars can't be choosers. All right, this might be the first hot take of the actual video here. Clash mode is the most balanced because each point is its own fight, allowing for comebacks. The issue lies in its map design, especially the first point, which feels random due to many angles. Push mode, however, heavily favors the team that wins the first fight, giving them an even bigger advantage at the checkpoint. Afterwards, the losing team must win multiple fights consecutively to catch up or surpass, which at that point flips the advantage back for the other team to have to win multiple fights in a row. Clash, in contrast, rewards team fights without depending on progress from the previous point, but map and spawn design could be improved. The last point favors defenders, but it's supporting the mode's comeback potential. Okay, so Clash mode is the most balanced because each point is its own fight. I mean, what about regular control? What about Flashpoint? Each of their points are also like, you know, independent fights, which allow for comebacks. I mean, I sort of agree with the second part with the map design's a little shitty, especially the first point, which feels random due to many angles. I actually disagree, depending on the map you're talking about. I think Hanaoka doesn't have that many angles. I think you literally only have to opt for right side, left side behind that gate. And then on Anubis, that actually has less, it feels like you're just stuck in that choke. That little tiny little one to walk into feels like a danger zone to walk into. And you literally have like 2 sides there. There aren't really that many angles if you think about it. If anything, it feels too clumpy. In any case, you said push mode. I actually fully agree with this point. This is the point I just made like, you know, 5 minutes ago in this video, but like I don't think Clash mode is the best balance at all for and your points kind of like fall flat. One thing I want to point out is I don't actually think maps need like, depending on the game mode, you don't necessarily need like a balanced spawn distance for any of the stuff. Like the only one that truly has a balanced spawn distance is I think Control, Because even if you play like hybrid or escort, like defenders, when you get that payload pretty close to the checkpoint, the defenders technically have a close respawn. That works for Clash, depending on the last point. I think for Flashpoint, I'm actually not sure how the calculation is for those spawn rooms. Maybe they are equidistant. I'm actually not too sure about that. But Control for sure is equidistant because it is mirrored on both halves. And that might be it. Like everything else is not mirrored, where defenders technically have an advantage to give you a comeback potential. But yeah. Hot take, make the game cross-platform in competitive too. There's proof that console players from different ranks can hold their own versus PC players. While that's true, aim assist becomes the big bottleneck here. We see how this works for Apex, where competitive players from both console and PC kind of play together, and it becomes like a massive issue. When you change the playing field peripherally wise, like it feels very strange. And this game wasn't necessarily designed for both to be coinciding, especially in a competitive environment. There's actually specific patches that console gets that PC doesn't. I'm pretty sure Torb is nerfed on console unless they changed it. At least that's how it used to be in like early Overwatch 1. I think Torb was weaker, and I think Ana's friendly shots on teammates will have more forgiveness on it because of the controller aim. And that's why people consider zimming cheating on console, because of the aim assist, where you get the mouse and keyboard input with the benefit of using a PC and using a mouse and keyboard with the controller aim assist. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. You know what I mean? So I would say no. Next hot take is, if Genji released today, people would be freaking out about the ultimate deflection on a regular cooldown. Well, I mean, what about Diva on like a very short cooldown, completely eating ultimates as well, or nullifying them? I actually don't think so. I actually think people, gamers in 2025, I mean, yes, they're a little bit more outrageous and outspoken about and probably overreact quite a bit. They'd freak out and then like quiet down after like a month of playing when they realize, okay, it's not that bad. Hot take, hero mastery is a total waste of dev time. TLDR, that team should just make a better tutorial first. We need that more. I agree with doing the better tutorial first. I wouldn't say hero mastery is a total waste of dev time, but it definitely didn't hit the mark, and it's a very unpopular mode. And I think the devs know that, which is why they've slowed down on hero mastery push. I think it's fine to like create multiple modes to kind of try to see what works. They definitely like threw a bunch of shit at the wall to see what sticks. You know, when you kind of go the whole GameCube Smash Melee route, where you just create these random ass like side modes. Because I remember when I used to play Smash as a kid, I personally enjoyed doing the thingy where like you play the character and you have individual like bullseye thingies to break, like a obstacle course for that specific character. And I thought I would enjoy hero mastery in Overwatch, but like maybe it's like in 2025, like the attention span's too short. If it's not engaging enough, it won't work. But when you're a kid and you're offline playing that for the first time as Smash, I loved it. And maybe we kind of basked in the nostalgia a little bit too much, Overwatch devs, and then we thought hero mastery would hit. But honestly, you don't know if it'll hit until you try it. And it looks like they tried it. It's not hitting, and you can clearly see they've slowed down on the dev time. I don't even know if they're going to finish the roster at this point, but I agree. It's definitely not hitting. It is kind of a waste of time going forward, but this is the part where like, do we commit to it and just slowly finish the rest of them, or just completely scrap it as well? And these are the tough decisions that as a project managers have to make. Good thing I'm not a project manager, because I'm not really sure what the right call is. Depends on our resources and how much budget we get, I guess. I disagree. 5v5 and 66 can't coexist. Okay, so I actually made the hot take statement that I think 5v5 and 66 can coexist. So there's my hot take. Let's see, your hot take is, I disagree. 5v5 and 66 cannot coexist. Both 5v5 and 66 would just split the player base and cause queue time issues for both modes. Imagine Blizzard reworking one hero separately to fit 66 or 5v5, and also turning out balance patches for two different modes. Okay, let me elaborate on why I disagree with this and why I do think they can coexist. Number one, the biggest bottleneck in Overwatch 1's role queue with queue times for tanks is because nobody wanted to queue tank. Their 6v6 mode right now solves that by having an open queue, so the queue times have been pretty good so far. 5v5 queue times depends on your rank, but having one tank is infinitely easier than filling in two as a hard role lock. My second point is that I think people will just inevitably play what they enjoy. I actually don't think modern players who have been playing Overwatch 2 and stuck through it, through thick and thin, through Overwatch 1 6v6 and Overwatch 2 5v5, they'll play what they feel like for the night. And maybe I'm just kind of like speaking from personal anecdote and personal bias. Right now I'm playing 6v6 because it's hot and fresh right now. There may be a point where I hit a certain rank or I get a little bored and I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna try 5v5 again, and then probably play it and grind a little bit of the ladder too. And I think over time, both of them can absolutely coexist, and the 6v6 queue times will not be a problem. The only problem with 6v6 will be the wider matchmaking, because I'm getting completely random ass games right now, simply due to, you know, the wider variety of skill ranges you get and people trying to learn how to flex onto different roles. It's an open queue, right? It's a classic Overwatch 1 where you just, sometimes you can lose games in the hero select screen when you literally roll into like 6 legitimate support players at this rank, and then some of them have to flex onto tanks, some of them have to maybe flex onto a DPS. Then it becomes questionable, but both of them can absolutely coexist. The last point is about queue times, which I kind of touched on. I believe Aaron Keller said this in an article where like queue times are mostly determined by the ratio of players, not necessarily raw volume of players. The ratio of players at a specific rank. I want to try to find the quote for that. Okay, I found the article. It's from July 25th, 2024. So like, you know, almost 9 months ago. Conversation on 5v5 and 6v6 at the time. And they're just showing how like DPS queue times post roll queue were the highest because it was the hardest roll. I mean, tanks would get fast queues because there just weren't enough tank players. And I want to talk about the ratio part that I was referencing earlier. Where was it? The game played better when all 3 roles were selected. The disparity caused social issues as players would try to pressure others into playing tank or support roles, even if they didn't want to, because DPS, you know, the DPS players always want to play DPS, tell other people to play the roles. It made balancing heroes more difficult since we couldn't balance around a certain role ratio for each team. Okay, so prior to roll queue, the matchmaker just needed to find 12 players of similar skill levels in order to put matches together. This is what bringing back 6v6. The current mode we have at the end of this mid-season, season 15 that you guys are playing right now is this, open queue. 12 players of similar skill. It doesn't take into account what your individual skill level is on tank, damage, or support. So when I'm queuing right now, sometimes I filled this tank yesterday. Some days I filled a support. I even played a couple of Torbjorn games because nobody was playing DPS. After roll queue, it needs to find 4 players of each role to make a match, right? 2 on each team. Total number of players queuing has no effect on this. It's almost solely governed by the ratio of players queuing for the least popular role. This is the point I want to find when people say they can't coexist. 6v6 and 5v5 can if 6v6 is truly open queue with, you know, at maximum 2 tank right now. Given the game's lower relative ratio of players queuing for tank than other damage and support roles, queue times went way up. So they try to address this, blah, blah, blah. Regardless of the amount of players in the game, queue times are always reflective of how many people are queued per role. In other words, the main driver of increased queue times is the ratio of players queued in each role. Since there are less players queuing as tanks, queues would likely go back to the way they were. This is if, of course, we have that. But obviously 5v5 reduced one, so you do have to hard queue into a tank in 5v5, but the 6v6 is open queue. I personally don't think this will be an actual problem, or like it may be a small queue time change, but like not as big as people expect, or people are making it out to be. Does that make any sense? Anyways, now the last part is imagine Blizzard reworking one hero to separately fit 6v6 for 5v5 and turning out balance patches for 2 different modes. I mean, if they're committing to having two modes with serious balance between the 2, they need to up their budget, up their team. And we've seen what Rivals has done. They've kind of kicked things into gear. Blizzard is okay with spending more onto their hero shooter right now. BlizzCon just got re-announced for next year. It seems like this was a wake-up call they kind of needed, and I'm kind of happy it did, you know? Competition is good, competition is healthy, and it makes them go like, oh shit, we need to do something. And now some people be like, ugh, Overwatch is desperate, but like, this is a good thing. I wouldn't say they're desperate, but it's just a wake-up call to be like, yo, let's make we have our distinct identity in this game. It's different than Rivals in these different aspects and facets, and players enjoy this part of our game. People enjoyed 6v6. They made a lot of noise about it. Let's do it. Let's deliver some new game modes, some new content, stadium, fun heroes, and let's keep going. So I'm glad that happened. Let's do one more take because I took a while for that one. All right, last one is actually a pretty good hot take here. Hot take, the hero bans that are coming, I think in season 16. Is it next season or the season after? I can't remember. Hero bans will be horrible for the game in a macro sense, especially if it's not limited to just Master, Plus, or above. Overwatch has too many one-trick players and heroes that don't have crippling hard counters like Widow and Zarya. I'd say it's to the point that one-tricks will either start pre-leaving games if their main gets banned, or they may just stop playing altogether. And if anybody remembers the season where they reworked plus nerfed Sombra into the ground and Widowmaker just owned lobbies across every skill elo above bronze, my expectation is that we'll be seeing that again in a more case-by-case basis with hero bans regarding characters like Widow and Zarya. I would say there's actually more options to deal with Zarya, especially if it's, well, maybe in the 5v5 sense, I can kind of see this starting to open up into a few more problems, but in the open queue 6v6 format, if they also opt for hero bans in that competitive format, I don't think it'll be as big of an issue because there's a lot more answers to Widow in many different categories there, because you're open to anybody flexing onto a different hero to deal with her if she's problematic, or you just ban the heroes that have very few counters, whatever that may be at the time. Zarya, I don't actually think needs to be as hard counter as people say. She can be annoying because people just run into her lasers. You can outspace her and outrange her in a lot of cases. Obviously, there are going to be some cases where, you know, you have to like deal with her a little bit, but, you know, I think that's part of the game. I don't actually think Zarya is that oppressive. She just seems to be dominating right now because like her perk is a little too strong, but if you like tune those back a little bit where like her enabling perk isn't as good, I think she'll be all right. I actually think people are going to tend to ban them more annoying heroes, not Zarya. So like Widowmaker might get banned. I actually don't think there's enough Sombra players to justify that unless they see they have a Sombra player. I think Sojourn might get banned a lot. I think Tracer might get banned a lot, and maybe Ana, and that's it. I don't actually think any tank would get banned. Actually, maybe Malga if they know they have a Malga player. But in a ranked solo queue, there's actually not as many Malga players as people make it out to be. It's usually reserved for pro play, and maybe high level sweats. Hero bans kind of like self-regulate the players that are playing in it, and if you're gonna play ranked, you have to go into the expectation of not coddling the one tricks. You know, if you're gonna play ranked, you have to expect your hero may get banned. Like, that's just the expectation. That's how we've seen with rivals. Some people may throw a fit about it, but like, if you can only play one hero and it gets, you know, you're getting banned a lot, and it does get banned a lot because it's meta or whatever, like, they may whine. And I do think old Overwatch team would be like, oh, we can't do that because we have a very casual base, and then they kind of fell back on it. It was like that when they retroactively picked the hero bans back in 2018 or 2019. I forgot what year it was at this point. It was like 4 heroes banned per week that they chose, and they did it for like 6 weeks, and people were like, no, I can't play my game all week because like my hero is getting banned. And then they just had to either resort to quick play or just not play at all. And then I think Overwatch was scared because they're like, oh my god, we scared off some people who only play Wrecking Ball that week, and Wrecking Ball was banned, so like they have no reason to play. We can't upset our player base. So then they stopped, even though it probably made the ranked experience better for the players who don't play Wrecking Ball, which is actually more people than you think, and the people who specifically play one. And I think because each game has independently chosen bans depending on the players, you can get around that. You tell people on your team, hey, I only play this hero. There may be some social issues that stem, but in a PvP competitive environment, whether it's hero bans, are people playing a hero you don't want them to play? Are people not switching when you ask them to switch? Are people sucking? Or even people doing well? It's like, you could call it the toxicity, but this will always exist. And I don't think hero bans like change that by any means. I do think it'll make the game feel better. Now that I've like personally experienced it, you know, I'm a low-key player nonstop in Marvel Rivals. I get annoyed when it gets banned, but like I have the expectation that it will get banned here and there. So expectation management more than anything. Anyways, I've yapped a little too much. That's it for me. Thanks for listening. Let me know what you guys think. Leave some more hot takes in the comments. Goodbye.